Welcome to Global Reality. Let's get started. We already know that India's foreign reserves have been depleting some time now. And it's not just the case with India. There are many other countries in Africa and South America facing dollar shortages. And also countries in Asia like Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, and many more. And what these countries need is considering the use of other currencies and avoid the US dollar and its hegemonic role in settling the international transactions. And RBI has achieved precisely that by allowing rupee invoicing and payments for overseas trade. It places a focus on exports from India and encourages the expansion of the global economy. It directly affects the forex reserve depletion and this country's relations, perceptions, and goodwill towards India, and will impact the outflow of dollars as a result of using alternate currency for imports, and thereby preserving the dollar currency reserves. Unlike prior regulations of the Foreign Exchange Management Act, which mandated that the final settlement be made in free foreign exchange, with the exceptions of Nepal and Bhutan, as INR can be freely exchanged for goods in Nepal and Bhutan. The ultimate payout to all nations may now be made in Indian rupee with RBI's approval. Earlier, it was not possible to deal internationally with the Indian rupee as RBI didn't allow such things. And also, no one wanted to trade in rupee and preferred dollars above other currencies, as the US dollar is the world's reserve currency. But this changed a bit when euro or British pound or even the Chinese yuan came along, but only to a certain extent, as countries still preferred dollars over other currencies, as dollars was considered as the most stable currency. But now, as the world scenario is changing and dollar is strengthening day by day, countries are losing their foreign reserves. Countries are looking for other alternates. And the Indian rupee can play a strong role as an alternate, or maybe even in the long run, may even emerge as a competitor to dollars and euros. And this would not just help countries diversify their forex reserves in other currency, but also help India. India could technically finance its trade deficit using rupees and not dollars, which may ultimately result in India not importing inflation because of currency depreciation. Obviously, there are many other factors that play a role in inflation, but it's still much better and safer for India to trade using the INR. Let us get to the basics. What this will do is that it will allow other countries to open their bank accounts in India and use the INR as foreign exchange currency to trade internationally. Not just with India, but also with other countries accepting the INR. And as these countries open their account in Indian banks, just like we keep our money in banks, even these countries will deposit rupee currency in their banks. And just like when we have additional funds in our accounts, we open an FD account or recurring deposit or invest in any other available investment options. These countries can use the surplus rupee balance for permissible capital and current account transactions. The balance in special Vostro accounts can be used for payments for investment in Indian government's projects and investment opportunities, export-import advance flow management, or invest in government bonds. It is to be noted that Sri Lanka's expressed interest in the INR settlement has been approved by the RBI, and Sri Lanka and Russia will be the first countries to use the INR as international currencies. Now let's look at it with some examples in short. For example, Russia can pay to India for India's pharmaceutical exports, launching their satellites through Indian Space Agency, India's IT services, or for any other exports. And in regards to any other country accepting the INR settlement, for example, Russia can pay to Bangladesh for its cotton exports. And as the transaction is executed in INR and the INR is deposited in Indian banks, India doesn't need to worry about currency risk as it is India's own currency and it just holds the rupee deposit. And as the currency risk is borne by the foreign bank. There are certain reasons why the RBI's move are so well balanced and crucial with India's global positioning. Subsequently, the interest of the global trading community in INR is a recognition of the Indian rupee as an international currency. And now the RBI allowing the use of rupee as a global currency speaks about India's confidence in its currency and its foreign relations, and also about India's position at global level, which reflects the changing world order. And why wouldn't it be? India is after all the fifth largest economy in the world and has proved its warm foreign relations and its responsibility towards the world, which was evident especially during the COVID-19 by providing vaccines to the world even as an aid to many nations, while other so-called developed and rich nations were stockpiling the vaccines. The RBI is additionally taking some actions. Banks have been asked by the RBI to make appropriate arrangements in order to carry out the decision. Banks will need prior permission from the Foreign Exchange Department of the RBI for opening Vostro accounts. Besides that, the government is trying to bring in new rupee users. India is targeting countries that are against US or hold a grudge against US because of sanctions or any other US actions towards them. There's a saying, enemy's enemy is our friend. Same is in this case. A country depleting and in short of its foreign reserves, just like India, is our friend. And the government is reportedly looking to bring these countries, among other countries, into the mechanism. And this may be the reason why around 35 countries like the UAE, Iran, Venezuela, Russia, Belarus, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Tajikistan, Cuba, Luxembourg, Sudan, Saudi Arabia, Mauritius, and many more have shown interest and support in the INR. As even in the given troubled situation between the West, United States and Russia clash, India is not just acting as a spectator, watching and enjoying the power play of both sides. It is still holding and maintaining its strong ties and relationship with both the worlds, thanks to its global influence and strong leadership. This is a great indication that the Indian economy and the rupee are ready to participate more actively in international trade. The US government has weaponized the dollar by using it as a means of international payments to impose primary sanctions and secondary penalties, such as denying target countries access to New York's dollar networks. India may be on the verge of doing organically what China tried to do artificially. China tried to do the same with its debt trap diplomacy by giving loans in yuan or renminbi. Despite China's massive capital export, the renminbi is not fully convertible on the capital account. Otherwise, the world's largest exporter's currency is ready to become a reserve currency starting in 2009. In any case, if China decides to settle its commerce in the yuan, there is so much to import from China that very few countries have to worry about having excess yuan reserves from their exports. That stage has not yet been achieved in India. However, it is not implausible that India could also grow to be a large worldwide dealer of products and services. With INR as global currency, the world will be able to purchase a wide range of locally produced goods and services, ranging from healthcare to tourism, from software and other IT enabled services to satellite parts and forest produce. However, the attempts to use the rupee for international trade and transactions is not new to India. In 1953, India concluded a comprehensive trade and payments agreement with the nation of the Soviet Union. Generally speaking, the majority of bilateral agreements were characterized by constant scissor-like operations, effectively resolving imbalances as the surplus country increased its imports from the deficit partner or provided credit to the latter. The Bhilai steel plant, along with other industrial facilities, oil refineries, and pharmaceutical companies that are all owned and operated by the Indian government, were all made possible due to Soviet Union's credit to India. Following the dissolution of the Soviet Union in 1991, the agreement came to an end, leaving behind certain problems with a rupee surplus and the RR rate of currency. Between 2014 and 19, the Indo-Russian bilateral trade in rupee-ruble dominations surged under the strong leadership of Prime Minister Sri Narendra Modi by fivefold, from 6% of total such trade earlier to an all-time high of 30%. Additionally, the two countries had agreed to handle India's payment to Russian arms suppliers for the purchase of 5 S-400 Triumph air defense systems. The value of the S-400 purchase alone is 5.2 to 5.6 billion dollars. It was done in order to avoid the possibility of US CASTA sanctions. The world's largest producer of raw diamonds by carat, Russian state-owned miner Alrosa PJSC started a rupee-ruble payment system with its Indian customers in 2018. Since Iran and India were both interdependent on oil supplies, when sanctions were imposed on Iran led by the US, a rupee account was set up to break the deadlock and serve as a channel for the settlement of trade between the two nations. India and the United Arab Emirates also signed a currency swap agreement in 2018 to boost investment and enable direct trade without using the dollars or other international currencies. The swap was for 200 crore dirhams or 3,500 crore rupees, $496 million, depending on which central bank requests the amount. The agreement was signed after the 12th India-UAE Joint Commission meeting, co-chaired by the then External Affairs Minister Srimati Sushma Swaraj and the UAE's Foreign Minister. There would be cultural acceptance of the Indian rupee in the lands that have historically enjoyed vibrant trade relations with India. To the middle of 20th century, the Indian rupee was also used as the official currency in the Emirates on the Eastern Arabian Peninsula, spanning Arabia, Eastward Persia, including the Central Asian republics of today, and Southeast Asia, namely Kuwait, Bahrain, Qatar, the Trucial States, and Oman. What it means is that the Indian rupee was the common currency in those territories as well as in India. In Qatar, for example, the Indian rupee was legal tender till 1974. And now, let's get back to the point. Countries took their time in learning the lesson of not touching the US or the euro, as the US and other European powers used their currency power to manipulate international politics as per their whims and fancies. Case in point, price cap on Russian oil, blockaging countries from SWIFT payment systems, and freezing their international bank accounts, sanctions on Russia, Iran, and Venezuela, or any other countries which denies to act as a US or European puppet. It is to be noted that US and Europe have made some hypocritical exceptions which obviously only benefit their own agendas. As Europe can't survive without Russia's gas, exceptions have been made which allows Gazprom's Moscow account to be operational. But using its strength while highlighting and pointing US-European hypocrisy, Russia forced its energy buyers to pay in rubles, which made rubles one of the best performing currencies in Europe. But same is not the situation with other countries suffering to a certain extent because of US-European actions. Now let's understand why the dollar holds strong under any global conditions. The US is one of those rare countries that prints dollar independently of its gold reserves or GDP calculations, whereas other countries base the printing of their currency on their reserves unless they choose to purposefully depreciate their own currency. This system, which started in the 1970s by the USA, along with coupling the dollar with oil, created a monopolistic economic position favoring the US and the rest of the world in a dependence of the dollar for international trade. This was a selfish move by the US, using its power rather than variable factors of economics in making the dollar value to be strengthened. The US is the only nation whose currency, the dollar, keeps rising in value abroad even if its trade deficit is negative and its inflation rate is rising at home. This is only a result of the dollar's peg to oil, which is why it is known as petrodollar. This unjustifiable, discriminatory system of international trade needs to be changed. The worth of a nation's currency must be determined by a number of variables, including its trade deficit, GDP, gold reserves, inflation, and purchasing power within its own borders, among many other variables. If this is the case, the dollar won't be as strong as it is now. Since the dollar is not the most ideal currency, the ideal currency would be the one that isn't volatile, such as a stable coin backed by the Bank for International Settlements or the International Monetary Fund. The US would oppose any such switch from the dollar to any other currency as the primary medium for settling cross border transactions. The best way to get ready to move away from the dollar's hegemony over the global financial system is to gradually boost the use of non dollar currencies like the rupee or yuan. And now let's get back to the benefits that it will have. Currently, when we trade with any country, we technically import two things: the actual import that we want, and before that, we import the dollars. Well, not physically, but technically, we convert the rupee in dollars. And while doing that, we pay additional sum as commission to banks for its conversion services. And as the USD can only be held in the US banks, almost every bank in the world has accounts in US banks, and they just transfer money from their US bank account to another country's US bank account when a trade settlement happens. Now, the same process will be adopted by India. The RBI's decision to allow settlement of international trade payments in rupees may have an immediate positive impact on trade with Russia and provide Sri Lanka with a window to import critically needed fuel, food, and medicines from India, thanks to a rupee line of credit that India may be able to provide. And this move is the first step towards 100% convertibility of the rupee into an international currency, which can be widely accepted by the world in the future. India can also improve its position regarding its trade deficit, and it will save commission on both sides, the importer and exporter, as they won't have to pay additional commission to convert their currencies into dollars, as they will be using the Indian rupee. And no, it won't just increase the demand for INR, which may result in rupee strengthening, but it will also create a cycle of money from India to India's development by attracting those countries' investment in India through its rupee surplus. For example, Russia currently has a current account surplus with India. Instead of receiving that amount in dollars, Russia would have to invest the money in India, either in government bonds or in projects in India. The RBI's move coincides with India's stated goal of maintaining reasonable level growth in the current fiscal year, despite indications of worldwide downturn in trade, as said by Commerce and Industry Minister Shri Piyush Goyal. After registering merchandise exports of $420 billion in 2021 to 22, despite geopolitical unrest, inflation, and high fuel prices, the government has set a target of $450 billion to $500 billion for the year 2022 to 23. The RBI's move of positioning Indian rupee as an international currency may help to build a stronger advantage, as it also helps other financially troubled countries to use rupee as the dollar prices surges. India shipped $37.94 billion worth of products in June, an increase of 16.78% year over year, down from the growth rate of 20.55% in May 2022 and 48.34% in June 2021. Another benefit is that it is expected to facilitate trade with countries under US and European sanctions like Iran and Russia. Larger trading partners are also interested in trading in rupees. A rupee real trade mechanism is still being discussed with Saudi Arabia. The central banks of India and the UAE are finalizing the details of a prospective rupee dirham trade system. Due to the fact that Gulf states exports to India exceeds its import, the UAE and Saudi Arabia are negotiating how to invest the Indian rupees they get as part of these transactions. Following Russia, banks from Mauritius and Sri Lanka launched unique rupee trading accounts in regional offices in India. Because Belarus backed Russia's invasion on Ukraine, it is subject to US and EU sanctions. A rupee trade settlement could be beneficial because India purchases fertilizers from Belarus. Now let's get to know what needs to be done. For the record, it is unclear that the points I make have been approved by the RBI or not. It should be allowed for countries' Vostro banks to trade out the rupee for other international currencies. What should happen is turning the INR into a truly floating and tradable currency worldwide. Just like dollar shipped Sri Lanka and sanctions hit Russia will be the first countries to use the Indian rupee trade settlement mechanism, other countries should soon join them in accepting and trading the INR as a global currency. And this is a good first step. And the INR may take some time to compete with other pre-established global currencies. But what's more important is that we had to start somewhere. And that's exactly what we did. Thank you for watching. Do like, share, comment and subscribe to our channel if you like our content.